Featuring the veteran artists from pop, rock, soul, country, folk, and blues that influence today's music world, this is the VVN Music Podcast. Today's show is brought to you by VVN Music Radio, the greatest songs by the veteran artists of the last 6 decades, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Hi, and welcome to episode 11 of the VVN Music Podcast. I'm Roger Wink, and today we're thrilled to once again have a chance to talk with the great Nils Lofgren. We first talked to Nils in 2011 for the release of his solo album, Old School. Since that time, he's toured extensively with Bruce Springsteen and the E Street Band behind his Wrecking Ball and High Hopes albums, released his 10-CD career retrospective Face the Music, and has just put out a brand new live album, UK 2015 Face the Music Tour. Nils Lofgren was originally trained extensively in classical accordion playing before switching to piano and guitar in his mid-teens. He formed his band Grin in 1968, and they eventually released 4 albums in the early 70s. In 1975, he recorded his first solo album and a discography that would eventually grow to over 24 studio releases. During the 70s, Nils also played with Crazy Horse and was part of Neil Young's band for the recording of the albums After the Gold Rush and Tonight's the Night. But it was his joining of Bruce Springsteen's E Street Band in 1984 that started a whole new chapter of his career. Replacing Steven Van Zandt after he left to pursue a solo career, Nils toured extensively with the band, starting with the Born in the USA tour and on the Tunnel of Love and Chimes of Freedom albums. After the hiatus by the band, he returned in 2002 and has played on all of Springsteen's recordings with the E Street Band since 2002's The Rising. This month brings a brand new E Street Band tour behind the new expanded version of The River, one that has forced Nils to postpone a tour of the U.S. that he had already had on the books. Thanks so much for talking to us again. We spoke 4 years ago, and since our last interview, you've released the Old School album. You've been on a long tour with the E Street Band. Let's see, you released your 10-disc Face the Music, and now you have the Face the Music Tour CD. Do you have trouble winding down in the short time between all of your different projects?
Yeah, a little bit. It's always just, it's never something I really feel like I do well. You get off the road and you're fried, but you're wired with all the adrenaline, and get home and try to assimilate in and help my wife Amy out with this beautiful home I'm in with our 4 dogs. You know, I'm not much use, but I can go and buy some milk and bread and take the dogs to the vet. But and then, of course, you fire up to go move into my own shows, which the duo show I've been doing with Greg Varlotta for 10 years now. We never commemorated live, and this last January on the road, my wife Amy implored us to record it. She thought it was some of the better shows we'd ever done, and I was still surprised about it, but I was so focused on moving from East Street into my own thing again. And it was a great idea because we got a great live CD out of it. And Amy, who designs the merchandise and sells it at the shows before and after in England, I can't always get her on the road in the States because she's got her home to run and her own life to lead. But she did a bit of that as a kid. She went on the road selling merchandise for the Tubes and Toto and the Go-Go's and the Beach Boys, Andy Williams. So she was familiar with that. And when we're in England, she'll come out and set up and sell the stuff before and after the show. I'll go out and sign. It's very grassroots, but she really, it's her brainchild to have this new live CD, and found great pictures and designed the website, designed the package with Dick and Linda Bangham, who run my website. And very proud to have a new live album, which we don't have we never had a live recording of the show I've been doing for the last 10 years with Greg, so it's nice to have one now.
When you do go to the UK and Europe, and I also assume around the United States, it's been traditionally acoustic. Is that because you enjoy playing in a more stripped-down manner? Is it a financial decision, or?
Well, it's all of the above. A lot of the little theaters in England, I used to play there with my bands, and when I play with a band, I don't produce a toned-down mellow show. It's extremely raw and aggressive, and it's deafening. Even with small amps, I mean, everyone's just hitting on 11. And I found a long time ago the intimacy of the acoustic thing. I mean, I'm at the point now that this new album is a lot more aggressive than my last acoustic record, and I'm playing a lot more lead. I've got some more overdriven foot sounds even on acoustic. I'll pick up my electric a little more. And so it's just a little more of an aggressive thing. But I find the intimacy, whether I'm alone or with Greg, who I love to play with, there's an intimacy there, and I get to tell stories, and it kind of weaves back and forth between storytelling and performing. So it's acoustic based, but the intimacy, it does fit better in these little theaters I play, and I think people appreciate it.
I know I've heard from a lot of soul and blues artists that they feel UK and European audiences have a deeper appreciation and respect for the music and its rich history. Have you had a similar experience?
Well, I love the audiences everywhere, and I've had great audiences in the States. Again, I'm playing these little places, so usually you have 300-400 people in a tiny room. They're on top of you, and they've come there for you. It's easy to get down in it and do a magical night, and that's my job. And but I will say I think there is a gratitude when somebody, like for instance this last trip, you just feel like, well, we've traveled thousands of miles from another continent. We've gotten on a bus and gotten to a little theater in a small town that's not London or Birmingham, and people come out and they're very grateful that you went to the trouble to get to their tiny town and their little theater, and they show up and expect something great, and if you give it to them, it turns into a magical night. And then afterwards I'll go out and get to hang out with my wife Amy and our driver Dave, who I try to work with whenever I can. We go back 23 years now, and I've been with Amy almost 20 this February. So it's very kind of down home and magical. We ask them to keep the pub open so people can, while they're standing in line, have a visit and have a drink. And it's just very grassroots, back to the basics of performing, which I started with as a teenager in the 60s. So God willing, I'll have a lot more runs like that. But yes, there's a reverence and respect there in UK, and I think some of it has to do with the fact that you're from America and if you've gone through the trouble to get there to sing for them.
There's a gorgeous cover of I Don't Want to Talk About It on the album. Do you have a long history with that song? Yeah,
basically, way back when I was 17, I walked in on Crazy Horse and Neil Young at the cellar door, and that led to a lifelong friendship. And, of course, after the Gold Rush project and before Tonight's the Night, where we lost Danny, Danny was just this massive talent, and the plan was always, way before I met them, for them to make a record without Neil. And I was honored that, Jack Nitzsche joined the band on keyboards to produce it, and they asked me, because we'd been good friends and palled around in the Topanga Canyon LA music scene in the late 60s, they asked me to join the band to make the record, which I did. I wrote Beggar's Day for Danny and added another song, Nobody. And, to kind of be in rehearsals and put that whole project together and then move into the studio and add Ry Cooder on Bottleneck Slide. It was a gorgeous project to be a part of, and sadly the only Crazy Horse record featuring Danny Whitten, the lead singer of the band. But Ralphie and Billy are still dear friends, and we've worked a lot with Neil. Of course, tragically, after losing Danny, and then Bruce Berry, a roadie, and a lot of other great musicians like Jimi Hendrix, Tonight's the Night was kind of a live, rough, reckless recording, and to me had the vibe of a Wake album that it was very kind of commiserative and healing in a dark way as we started losing dear friends.
Speaking of losing friends, the album also includes a song that was originally Miss You Ray, but is now Miss You C, and for the to salute the passing of the great Clarence Clemons. The last time we talked, it was shortly after Clarence passed away, and I was wondering if time was starting to heal the hurt, or if the emotion of his passing.
Well, it's still a big loss and still feels kind of raw and painful, but I will say that, the funeral was on my 60th birthday, and I'd written this song, Miss You Ray, on the old school record about loss. And the point was, as you get older, the grief of all the losses mount up and can take you out and blind you to what's left. And that had happened to me. And that night I just wanted to be miserable and wallow in Clarence's passing and get home. And my wife, Amy, insisted on taking about 30 of us to a birthday dinner to celebrate my birthday, which I did not want to do. And it turned into a beautiful, commiserative, 5.5-hour dinner where we laughed, we cried, we told stories. And it was very healing and powerful, much like the point of the song I'd already forgotten about. And so since that night, I decided to rewrite the lyrics to speak of my E Street family, and it became Miss You See, which I sing every night, and almost every night, and it was great to get a live recording of it. And, back to the I Don't Want to Talk About It, it was just one night we sang it once and got this beautiful version to share because that was, our signature song on the first Crazy Horse record with Ry Cooder playing live Bottleneck and me and Danny singing across from each other. And then Ralphie and I running out and adding a harmony track, and we were done. So I've been blessed to work with a lot of great people, and, of course, it's always sad to lose any of them.
Speaking of the Old School album, we had that as one of our top 10 albums of the year that it came out because it was just a fantastic set.
Thank you.
And, is there any new studio material coming along in the near future?
I just started writing this last few months. Of course, I've been preoccupied with touring and all that goes with that. And but I've started the process, and I'm hoping at some point next year, it may be deeper into the year, I'll have enough songs written to start recording another record. Don't really know where it's going to go yet. There's a lot of songs I wrote with Lou Reed that never saw the light of day, and I want to dig a few of those out and dust them off and see if I can sing them and present them. But yes, I've finally cracked the surface of writing, and hopefully that'll lead to a new album, at least the beginning to record it at some point later next year.
You're famous for the barrage of guitars that you take when you go out on E Street band tours. What kind of equipment do you take when you go to do your acoustic shows in Europe?
It's much simpler. On my shows, I'll take 5 or 6 acoustics because there's different tunings and capos all through the night. I'll have a couple strats because I'll put on the strat. And instead of a massive guitar rig with the Fuchs amps, Fuchs, and the Buzzy Feiten cabinets, 2x12 cabinets, I use 2 of them run together. And Buzzy Feiten, Feiten, is one of my favorite guitar players in history. He was a teenager playing for the Paul Butterfield Blues Band. I used to follow him around in the 60s, and we're still friends, and he's still one of my favorites of all time. But when I play my own stuff, I'll downsize to a Fender Blues Junior with 112, and I'll run it through some foot pedals, and, again, much simpler. It might have a half dozen 8 guitars out there, different tunings, acoustic and a couple of electrics, as opposed to the army of 50 guitars I'll take out with Bruce.
You recently received the Outstanding Contribution Award from Classic Rock magazine that had previously gone to people like Jeff Lynne and John Paul Jones and Jeff Beck. I bet that was kind of a magical night.
Yeah, it kind of freaked me out. I just heard about it as we headed to England, and it came to be on a travel day where Amy and I were able to get into London, take place in this great awards show. Andy Newmark, a dear old friend and one of the great drummers of all time, presented it to me. And, I planned to get up and speak briefly with a couple jokes. And, of course, I got a little nervous, which is not usual for me anymore. And I just blathered and rambled on and way too long. But you know what? They let me keep the award. And the next night, people showed up to hear me sing. So I still am a little disappointed. My wife didn't take a shoe off and throw it at me and tell me to wrap it up. But it was a beautiful night, and got to have a brief chat with Jimmy Page, one of my heroes who I've met before, and Brian May, and, so many great artists there. And it was really the English music scene, what we call the British Invasion, the Stones and Beatles, that got me off classical accordion and fell in love with all rock and roll. And those bands opened the floodgates for the Stax Volt, Motown, Muddy Waters, Howlin' Wolf, Little Richard, the whole lot. So I owe a deep credit. I'll always have a deep mystical place in my heart for the English music scene, the UK and Ireland, and to be there and pick up an award for outstanding contribution meant a lot.
We'll return to our interview with Nils Lofgren in just a moment, but first, we're continuing to expand VVN Music Radio. The streaming service now features over 6,000 of the greatest tracks that veteran artists have recorded over the last 6 decades, with thousands more to come in the near future. We're committed to being the station for the true music lover, one that loves music from all genres, whether it be metal, Motown, country, or smooth pop. VVN Music attempts to recreate the sounds of radio of the 60s and 70s when stations were willing to mix their music to give listeners a well-rounded experience. Plus, at 6 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time every night, we feature an hour of music exclusively from the 60s, followed by an hour of the 70s and one from the 80s. We'd love to have you give VVN Music a try. Simply go to vvnmusic.com and click on the VVN Music Radio ad in the right column or on the menu at the top of the screen. You can also hear VVN Music through popular services like Shoutcast, TuneIn, and Radionomy. That's VVN Music Radio. You know, this may be a sore subject, but you're just 2 years away from your 50th anniversary from when you started Grin. And do you have any thoughts at that time that you'd be going this strong, this many years on?
No. When I hit the road at 17, honestly, I would have never been that greedy to think 47 years later I'd, be playing a run of 21 shows in little towns throughout England, and people would come to hear me play, and I'd have been in some of the great bands in history, and still able to sing and play well, and travel with my wife whenever I can, and come home to a lovely home with 4 dogs and Amy, and I never would have been that greedy. So it is a bit overwhelming and beautiful, and I'm still kind of focused now, and keeping my aches and pains and beat up body together, and the musical mind and spirit, though, is alive and well thanks to the audiences that keep showing up.
I just recently read that when you were, I guess, in high school or when you were younger, you were a gymnast, which kind of led to some of the things that you did on stage for years. You also had a double hip replacement, I understand.
Yeah, it was between jumping off drum risers and PA stacks and trampolines, doing backflips with guitars, and playing basketball in city courts, which was a hobby of mine. I love basketball. To my horror, I destroyed all the cartilage in both hips. They were bone on bone for years, and I hobbled around in great pain. And finally, Amy and I got to New York and had a great surgeon, Paul Pellicci, Pellicci at HSS, Hospital for Special Surgery, replaced both at the same time. And, of course, I just finished it was in between the Magic and working on a Dream tours, and I kind of half seriously said, can I spend some extra money and get some flubber in there so I can jump 20 feet and dunk? They said, we don't offer flubber at any price. And they said, the new hips like motion and they hate impact, so don't be playing basketball or jumping off trampolines or you'll destroy the new ones quickly. So it scared the heck out of me, and they're in great shape and working well because I did what I was told, and was grateful to have such a great surgeon do the job.
You had solo dates set for the early part of the year, and then Bruce came along and decided to take the river out on the road. How much notice do you usually get as far as an E Street Band tour like that?
Well, it varies. This is, as has happened in the past, kind of came out of the blue. We were going to do Saturday Night Live, and that was really the only promotion of it. I'm sure Bruce would and will maybe do some big TV interviews to promote it. But even though it came out of the blue and, I had some shows booked, it's always a blessing to have an E Street run, however brief, and I'll reschedule those shows as time allows when I have a final schedule, and hopefully in April and May I'll be out honoring the shows that are still on the books we're selling tickets for, and it'll be a hell of a great way to start the year, going from E Street into my solo duo shows with Greg in the spring.
You joined the E Street Band after the Born in the USA album, I believe.
Yes.
So you weren't there for the recording of the original River album. I know you had to learn the songs. I believe you performed it live back in 2009, but are you going through a process of refreshing yourself on some of the lesser played songs from the album? Yeah,
there's that, and also there's 12 tracks I never heard in my life that are brand new for all the listeners, in addition to another dozen or so from the Tracks album that were from those sessions. I actually bought a ticket and saw that tour at the Sports Arena in L.A. I was living out in Los Angeles for many years. And I was always a fan of the band, so of course, there's some songs I'm familiar with, some that are very distant, and some that are brand new, and my job is to study all of them. And we've got a an intense couple of weeks of rehearsal planned early in the year before we hit the road, and I'm sure we'll get it all together, and it'll be great.
Is that your usual process? Do you usually have just a couple weeks of rehearsal before you go on the road?
It varies. A lot of times we've had what personally I consider kind of recklessly limited rehearsals, and it always works out because we have these long sound checks and we tweak the show as we go. One of the big differences, of course, was a very difficult when we had to move on without Clarence. We had a very unusual 2 months, and slowly but surely tried to put a great show together without Clarence. And fortunately, Jake, his nephew, stepped in with his uncle saxes and has continued to do a great job. But that was a very difficult transition, and we allowed for a lot longer rehearsals than usual. There's no rhyme or reason to it. It's really just up to Bruce to decide what he thinks we need to craft the show he's got in mind, and it evolves from day one to the last show, literally throughout every tour.
With this tour, you're going to be, obviously, a good portion of the set is going to be set, but I know in most tours with Bruce that things vary a lot from night to night. How many songs do you have to be ready to play when you go out normally with him?
Well, it's a very stream of conscience, organic thing. I mean, last tour, I think we played 240 different songs or more. A lot of them are signs from the audience we've never played together in our lives, so you can't really prepare for that. You just do your homework. Bruce doesn't even know what he's going to call night to night, so obviously you stay on top of the songs you've played. I like to get there a couple hours ahead of the band every day and do my own, guessing, like, for instance, more personally, look, if there's a blues song we haven't played in 20 years, it's a blues song, and we'll kill it without any preparation. If there's more intricate songs that might get away from me, where I go through 2 or 3 guitars during the set, and I'll study those and try to not let anything get too far away. But you can't stay on top of 300 songs at any one given time. It's just, I can't, rather. So it's just kind of, I've been there 31 years. I've got a good horse sense, and it's fun to kind of second guess what Bruce might have in mind coming down the road, which is kind of a surprise, I think, sometimes to him, thanks to the energy of the crowd. He just takes that night to night and lets it evolve us in the show under his watch. And it's very organic and natural. But, yeah, we do a lot of reckless improv, and I think it's good for us and the audience.
I had the honor of seeing you with Bruce and the E Street Band on Halloween night 3 years ago, and it was the first show that the band had played post-Hurricane Sandy. And it was a very emotional night, I think, for the band because of all the damage that was done to the Jersey Shore. And I know that you have played hundreds of shows. I'm just curious if you have any memories of that night.
Well, that whole run, we did a telethon on TV, and then we did the big 12-12-12 shows. And, my wife's from West Orange, New Jersey, and certainly I'm an honorary New Jersian that, starting with Grin, has been up and down the Jersey Turnpike probably more than almost anyone who lives there. That was a powerful loss, and the band took it to heart, and it certainly influenced the mood as we went out and started doing shows after that. But like anything in life, in our personal lives, something happens and you rebuild and you make the best of it and you roll with it. And, it's the old adage is, it's not how many times you get knocked down, it's, how quick you can get back up and dust yourself off. And every person on the planet has to deal with that personally and collectively with their work families, their personal families, because that's just part of life. Nobody can get around.
It was quite a night. I mean, along with very emotional songs like Jersey Girl and so forth. You also, I think it was the first time Bruce had ever played Night with the Jersey Devil live, and you also took a request from the audience, which goes back to what you were saying earlier, and played Monster Mash, which I don't think you had ever played before.
Yeah, that was, fortunately, as a kid growing up, we're all kind of distantly familiar with hundreds of great songs, which usually covers most of the signs in the audience. And Bruce has a great horse sense about, biting off something reckless that might be difficult but not impossible, and he does that nightly. So just an honor to be there and participate in all that. And, you mentioned Jersey Girl. I married one that I met at the Stone Pony, and, that song always has a special place in my heart.
You, as we talked about, had your solo tour pushed out, and I think your first rescheduled date is like 2 weeks after the River Tour ends. Any chance that Bruce is going to extend and you're going to have to do a little bit more playing around with your schedule?
Yeah, I don't know. Right now they said this is the tour, and so I've, postponed the first 3 months, 2.5 months of shows, 3 months of shows. 2.5. Mid-March we're done, and that's a Bruce question. I couldn't answer it for him at all. I mean, my intent is to get back in April and May and honor the shows I already had on the books, and then just continue on with my solo career through the year. I can't really. It's not in my best interest to what if too much. I've got my hands full with my personal and musical life, and thrilled with the chapter coming up. So I'm just going to focus on that, and what Bruce decides to do down the road, I can't really invest a lot of time in. I'm just grateful he's dictated another chapter of live shows, which is my favorite thing to do with my own music, and of course with the E Street Band, is play live in front of an audience. And I'm glad we got to run a 24 shows. So that'll be my focus, and getting back in April and May to doing my own thing. And if something changes, you roll with it. But right now, as far as I know, that's the schedule.
The last time we talked, you mentioned that you and your wife, Amy, were very much involved with Best Friends Animal Sanctuary. Are you still involved with the welfare of animals and that cause?
Yes, we're goodwill ambassadors for Best Friends Animal Sanctuary. They do extraordinary work. They were the ones who took all Michael Vick's dogs and saved them when everyone wanted to put them down. And we love animals. And Amy's also involved with Cass Homeless Shelter here that helps our veterans, and CCCH, another local food bank in Scottsdale, and she's very active in all three of those charities, and I'm honored to be a part of that. But we have a special place in our heart, certainly for our vets, and also for the Best Friends Animal Sanctuary, that they do extraordinary work, and we're honored to be goodwill ambassadors on their behalf.
Well, Nils, I really want to thank you for taking the time to talk to us. It sounds like you've got a pretty exciting year coming up.
Yeah, and it's all going down at Christmas, so it'll be a jolly old time. And one of my brothers, Mike, just came for a visit, and I got my brother Mark and his family coming out before New Year's. I'm just grateful for all of it, and to have some good work ahead of me with the band and my solo shows with Greg. And appreciate you very much spreading the word about the new live CD and the box set, Face the Music, 10 discs, and it's all available at nilslofgren.com also.
Well, it's always an honor to talk to you, and I wish you only the best, and I wish you and your family a really great holiday.
Yeah, you too. I hope you have a great holiday, Roger, and yours too, and I appreciate you spreading the word, and it's good to talk to you.
Our thanks to Nils Lofgren for talking with us. We'll be back soon with another edition of the VVN Music Podcast. Remember that you can get the latest news on the veteran artists of pop, rock, soul, country, folk, and blues at vvnmusic.com, where you can also find back editions of our podcast with guests like Steve Hackett, John Anderson, and Lloyd Price, along with the brand new VVN Music Radio. If you have any comments or questions about the website or this podcast, please send them to vvnnetwork@gmail.com. Our theme music is performed by Yahar. This program was recorded on January 10th, 2016, and is a production of the VVN Network. Copyright 2016.